Back in 1980, around the 1980s, sociologist named Ray Oldenburg wrote a book he called The Great Good Place. Has anyone ever heard of that book before? Well, good. You can't contradict me if I'm wrong. Oldenburg was interesting enough, points out that in most societies, every human society, every culture, there are three central places where people gather and engage each other. The first place is home, obvious. The second place, he says, is work. But he asserts there is this very important third place, essential to community, especially community and democracy. These third places are informal gathering places, such as a local bar, street cafe, coffee house, maybe even a local bookstore, where people come together and connect. Unplanned ways for conversation, a conversation that often transcends distinctions of class and status and race. Oldenburg argues that it is in these third places people become connected and form bonds, form friendships to varying degrees. Without these third places, Oldenburg argues, without these friendships, community erodes, civility declines, and isolation and division grow. 2020, the former United States Surgeon General Vivek Murthy wrote a book called Together, The Healing Power of Human Connection in a Sometimes Lonely World, in which he makes the case that loneliness, this is like in April of 2020 in the midst of the pandemic, but even before then, that loneliness is actually a public health concern. It's a root cause, a contributor to alcoholism and drug addiction. It's a root cause and contributor, loneliness, to violence and depression and anxiety. Loneliness, he argues, is affecting not only our health, but also how our very children experience school. How we might perform in the workplace. It's very much this sense of loneliness contributing to that sense of division and polarization in our society. And he quoted and identified recent research on friendship that illustrate the importance of having friends and having stable, healthy friendships, how important and crucial they are to human well-being, even contributing to how long we will live. People who have friends, close confidence, are more satisfied with their lives, less likely to suffer depression and anxiety. People with no friends experience, or maybe have people who have poor quality friendships, really the statistics show are twice as likely to die prematurely. That in actuality, it's a risk factor greater if you're lonely than the effects of smoking 20 cigarettes a day. And even in these studies, the formation of what psychologists call weak ties, which are simply connections with acquaintances, such as a work friend you might bump into, or a person you play pickleball with, or the waitress you know at your favorite restaurant, that those weak ties even have a profound effect on our mental health. It gives it a boost. Even those connections make a difference. Seems obvious, right? And I would put forward, and I don't think you'd find this surprising to hear, that we live in a time of crisis of connection, or lack thereof. It's affecting, I would argue, all our souls profoundly. And this has struck me lately in conversations with family and friends and church members, even casual acquaintances I might meet on the street who express a sense of despair, sense of hopelessness and helplessness about our society today, the directions we are heading. Wars all over the world. We can cite Ukraine and Gaza, economic and racial inequality, political divisions heating up in this election season, the personal struggles we experience ourselves or those around us. Can we do anything? I hear people asking to make a difference. How do we move beyond this, I would say, paralysis of hopelessness and despair? It's an important question. I think all of us face these days. So Jesus gives his great commandment, as I said on Maundy Thursday. Maundy is actually the Latin word for commandment. And that commandment is an exhortation to love one another as I have loved you. And that's the fruit of the vine encapsulated in the expression, the very definition of what it means to follow Jesus, to abide in him, and he abides in us. As later in 1 John, something I say often at weddings and at funerals, God is love, and those who abide in love abide in God, and God abides in them. Jesus doubles down on this exhortation by telling the disciples, and I don't know if you were startled by this, but I wasn't somewhat, by telling his disciples something strange, something unexpected. Jesus says to those gathered around the table, he says, you know what? You are my friends. I don't call you servants. You abide in this love. I do not call you servants any longer, but I call you friends. Jesus redefines the relationship with him as one not of discipleship, but friendship, not between a teacher and a pupil or a master and slave, but as the equality of friendship, the equality of affection in a friendship, of care, of regard, as if between two friends. This is not hierarchical. This is connecting as friends. We are, as odd as it sounds to my ears, we are God's friends. Now, it'd be easy to dismiss this commandment to love one another as I have loved you as kind of trite and cliched. We hear it often in church. We hear it every Maundy Thursday. How can this love, how can this idea of friendship speak to a world filled with war and despair and injustice and hopelessness? It seems a kind of small thing to speak to a world where violence and hate exist and reign, it seems, every day. Can loving one another as friends really, really make a difference? Jesus deepens the challenge to the disciples and to us. Love isn't just a feeling, a slogan, a quaint, vague encouragement. No, love is much more profound than that. No one has greater love than this: to lay down one's life for one's friends. Now, one way to understand this is not necessarily that we're going to throw ourselves in front of a bus to knock out someone, or not necessarily that we are going to die upon the cross for our friends, but that really the profound friendship expressed here is one that is life-giving. That kind of love that is not selfish, but life-giving to those around us. Now, I'm not sure where I came across this, but I heard this recently. Someone described having certain people who were, what they said, five-finger friends. I thought that odd. Meaning they could count on one hand those friends who are their closest confidants, those friends who are the ones they can count on to support and listen, to show up when they are needed, a five-finger friend. Are those friends who are life-giving. Now, in many ways, this is why it bothers me when I hear about preachers preaching a kind of Christian nationalism, a religion rooted in stoking fear and anger. I find their image of God problematic, heretical even. Not a God of life-giving love, but something more reflective of their own projections, their own prejudices, their own preconceptions. And it has me ask, do our lives reflect that life-giving love of God? Are we five-finger friends to each other, to those we encounter? Are we loving our friends, our neighbors, in ways that give them life? Are we in small ways and maybe even bigger ways offering our friendship, life-giving friendship to others, especially those who might find themselves friendless, isolated, alone? Are we five-finger friends to each other and to the hurting in this world? These are the questions at the essence of what it means to be a friend of Jesus. And one wonders, would that really make a difference? It seems so small. Now, I find myself this past week among friends of Heartland working at the rummage sale. And they were friends to each other. And it may seem a trivial thing, a rummage sale, some church in the suburbs of Des Moines. But I saw love and friendship at work here, and to the strangers who came in the door. Friend Carol, every single person for all those days, welcomed every single one of them. Friend Kathy was having a conversation in Spanish with a woman from El Salvador and from Mexico. Carol alluded to that. And exchanged information and made a connection and made a friend. And friend Todd talked everybody's ear off. But Todd is right. It was the connection. It was just this welcome of people who we may not ever see again, but who sometimes come back. But just that profound connection for that moment, whoever came through our doors was not alone. And I do think that makes a difference. Can the church be a space? Can the church be a people of life-giving friendship? Can we be that third place where people come together and are accepted and experience grace, find welcome, find conversation, find five-finger friends? Now again, it may seem a small thing, ineffectual, but in reality, it's the only thing in many ways that can change the world. So I thought I'd end probably with my favorite theologian, Kermit the Frog. Many of you remember the song that I think it won an Academy Award, Rainbow Connections. Kind of captures this idea. The final verse of the song goes, "Have you been half asleep? And have you heard voices? I've heard them calling my name. Is this the sweet sound that calls the young sailors? The voice might be one and the same. I've heard it too many times to ignore it. It's something that I'm supposed to be. Someday we'll find it. The rainbow connection, the lovers, the dreamers, and me." To God be the glory this day and forevermore. Amen.